Admiral Zexal of the Galactic Concordant adjusted his ceremonial sash for what felt like the dozenth time, its intricate weave catching the harsh glow of the Human Entertainment Center's garish lights. The place was a sensory assault. Blaring sounds, flickering holographic displays, and a chaotic swirl of human voices that grated against his sensitive antennae. He longed for the sterile quiet of his diplomatic escort ship, yet something about this place, this Galaxy Games arena, tugged at his curiosity, pulling him deeper into its frenetic heart. The Concordant had long abandoned such frivolous pursuits, favoring rigorous training simulations over what they deemed wasteful entertainment. But Zexal's mission was clear: evaluate humanity's readiness for interstellar cooperation. That meant understanding every facet of their society, even the ones that seemed utterly pointless. A surge of excitement from a nearby crowd caught his attention, registering as a sharp spike on his biosensors. It wasn't the aimless energy he'd come to expect from humans, particularly their young. This was different, focused, almost disciplined. Threading his iridescent, towering form through the throng, he ignored the curious glances from onlookers and found himself standing behind a young human female, no more than 12 standard cycles old by his estimation. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, her eyes locked on a holographic display with an intensity that rivaled any Concordant officer on a bridge. Her name, he overheard from the whispering children around her, was Sarah. "Warning, hostile craft detected in Sector 7, announced the game's computer in a tone so crisp it could have belonged in a Concordant warship's command center. Zexal's antenna twitched with intrigue. On the screen, Sarah's small, human-designed craft executed a flawless tactical rotation, maintaining its momentum vector, a maneuver that had taken Zexal himself 3 grueling years to master at. The Academy? The crowd buzzed with excitement. "Sarah's going for the record again," one child whispered. "She always nails the Curlin Nebula sequence." The nebula materialized on the display, its swirling gases rendered with startling accuracy. Sarah didn't hesitate. Her ship spiraled into the nebula, using its electromagnetic fields to mask her engine signature, a tactic Zexal had employed during the Proxima campaign, one not taught to Concordant cadets until their advanced training. "Pursuing vessels losing lock," the computer reported. "Sensor efficiency reduced to 30%. Sarah's ship emerged from the nebula's far side, but she wasn't finished. In a move that made Zexal's inner membranes contract, she initiated a controlled plasma vent. The superheated material interacted with the nebula's particle field, creating a cascading reaction that briefly illuminated the pursuing ship's positions. "Targeting solution acquired," Sarah said, her voice calm and professional, mirroring the computer's cadence. Her fingers danced across the weapons console, and streams of energy lanced out with surgical precision. The hostile ship's shields flared, then collapsed. "Level complete," the computer declared. "New high score. Achieved. Tactical rating. Superior." The crowd erupted in cheers, but Sarah remained focused, already preparing for the next challenge. Zexal leaned closer, his diplomatic mission momentarily forgotten. The game's interface was primitive by Concordant standards, yet its underlying principles were anything but. This was no mere diversion. It was a training tool disguised as entertainment. "Would you like to try, sir?" Sarah asked, turning in her seat with a bright smile. "This level has some really interesting gravitational mechanics." Zexal's translator took a moment to process the absurdity of the offer. A human child inviting a senior Concordant officer to play a game. Yet, watching her deftly begin the next scenario, he realized he might need to rethink what children's game meant. "Perhaps I will," he replied, his antennae tilting forward with interest. "But first, please explain how you knew to use the nebula's electromagnetic field in that manner." Sarah's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Oh, that's just basic stellar phenomena manipulation," she said, as if it were as simple as tying a knot. "Would you like me to show you some of the really advanced techniques?" "Basic," she called it. Zexal felt his report to the Concordant. High Command was about to become far more interesting. The key to Stellar Command 2185, Sarah explained, her fingers hovering over the holographic controls, is understanding that everything connects to everything else. She demonstrated by diverting power from her forward shields to boost her sensor array. See how the power distribution affects multiple systems? Zexal's neural augments whirred, recording every detail. The game's interface bore an unsettling resemblance to the Concordant's own bridge training simulators. This scenario is one of my favorites, Sarah continued, unaware of the Admiral's growing fascination. You have to escort a civilian transport through contested space, but your ship is underpowered, and the enemy knows your route. The scenario loaded, and Zexal's antennae twitched in recognition. The tactical setup was nearly identical to the classified Kazakh Ray incident from 30 years prior. Most players try to outgun the raiders, Sarah said, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd found a better way. But that's not how real space combat would work, right? Zexal nodded cautiously. Indeed not. How would you approach it? Sarah angled her ship's vector, using the transport's mass to create a gravitational microlens that extended her sensor range while masking her own signature. It was an advanced application of relativistic principles, one most concordant. Officers didn't grasp until their 5th year. The trick is thinking in 3 dimensions, she said, as if explaining something as mundane as walking. Space isn't flat like an ocean. You can use everything around you. A warning klaxon sounded as raider ships emerged from an asteroid cluster. Sarah's response was immediate and unorthodox, a controlled reactor surge that created a sensor ghost, confusing the raiders' targeting systems. They always fall for that, she grinned, repositioning her ship in the brief window of chaos. They're too dependent on their sensor data, she added. They don't trust their instincts. Zexal suppressed a shudder. The Concordant had spent generations engineering instincts out of their training, favoring precision and protocol. Yet this human child was demonstrating why that might have been a mistake. The engagement continued with Sarah employing a dizzying array of tactics, some textbook, others wildly unconventional. She used stellar winds to mask her engine signature, turned a sensor probe into an improvised mine, and even scraped her shields against an asteroid to create a debris field that baffled her pursuers. 7 minutes. 32 seconds, she announced proudly as the mission completed. Not my best time, but still pretty good. Zexal paused, choosing his words carefully. How did you learn these techniques? Sarah shrugged, queuing up the next scenario. Just playing, mostly. Dad got me started on the basic series when I was 7, and I worked my way up. The physics engine in this version is really good. They worked with actual space pilots to make it realistic. Realistic. The word sent a chill through Zexal's scales. The game's physics engine wasn't just realistic, it was accurate. Enough to serve as a military training tool, and humans were giving it to their children as entertainment. Would you like to try a multiplayer scenario? Sarah offered, gesturing to the second control station. There's this really cool mission where you have to coordinate with your partner to collapse a protostar to create a hyperspace shortcut. Zexal's sash felt suddenly constricting. Collapsing protostars to generate hyperspace corridors was a theoretical concept, classified at the highest levels of concordant research. Perhaps, he managed, you could show me exactly how that works. The protostar scenario loaded, with a cheerful visual flourish that belied its staggering implications. Sarah adjusted the stellar containment field with minute precision. The trick, she explained, is to calculate the resonance frequency of the protostar's magnetic field. Match it just right, and you can direct the collapse instead of letting it happen randomly. Zexal's augments struggled to keep up. She was manipulating concepts that had consumed entire concordant research divisions. Most players try to brute force it, she continued, tweaking the field's amplitude. But that wastes energy and usually crushes your ship. You have to be subtle. subtle. From a species known for its blunt approaches, the word was jarring. Yet Sarah's control would have impressed the Concordant's finest stellar engineers. "Watch this part," she said excitedly, making microscopic adjustments. The protostar pulsed in a peculiar rhythm, and Zexal's augments confirmed she was creating a resonance cascade that shouldn't have been possible with the game's technology. "See how the space-time fabric starts to fold?" she pointed out. "That's where you position your ship for the jump." Zexal's membranes fluttered nervously. The simulation depicted an artificial hyperspace corridor with disturbing accuracy. The math behind such an operation was supposedly beyond human understanding, yet here was a child creating one while explaining it like a cooking recipe. "The really fun part," Sarah continued, oblivious to his distress, "is when you add multiple ships. Each one helps shape the containment field, making the corridor more stable. My friend Jamie and I kept one open for almost 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Long enough to move a battle fleet. The implications made Zexal's armor feel inadequate. "Oh, and here's something cool I discovered last week," Sarah said, pulling up new controls. "If you modify the field harmonics just right, you can predict where the corridor will emerge. Most players think it's random, but there's a pattern." Zexal watched in stunned silence as she demonstrated. His augments confirmed she'd independently discovered principles of hyperspace manipulation that had taken Concordant scientists decades to theorize. "Would you like to try?" she offered, gesturing to the second station. "It's more fun with 2 players. The physics, engine shines when you experiment with cooperative maneuvers." Zexal moved toward the controls almost unconsciously, part of his mind already drafting an urgent message to High Command, another part eager to see what else this child had discovered. "Perhaps," he said, settling in, "you could show me these cooperative maneuvers. For educational purposes, of course," Sarah beamed. "Great. Let me show you this neat trick involving quantum entanglement and stellar plasma. It's tricky at first, but once you get the hang of it..." Zexal's antennae drooped. "Quantum entanglement? Of course. Why not?" "All right," Sarah said, switching to training mode. "The first thing you need to know about quantum entanglement in Stellar Command is that it's not as complicated as everyone makes it sound. You just have to feel the rhythm of the particles." Zexal stared at his control panel, his augments struggling to process her words. Feel the rhythm of the particles? The concept clashed with every tenet of his training, yet he was intrigued. "Here, let me set up a simple scenario," Sarah offered, her fingers flying across the interface. "We'll start with basic particle pairing. It's like dancing, but with subatomic particles." His antennae twitched at the analogy. Concordant quantum mechanics training involved complex equations, not dancing. "Now watch what happens. When I modulate the field like this," Sarah said, creating a perfect quantum bridge between 2 points. "The particles want to be in sync. You just help them find their partner." Zexal attempted to replicate her technique, his augments calculating precise parameters. The result was a destabilized field that collapsed instantly. "Oh, don't worry about the numbers too much," Sarah said encouragingly. "Try closing your eyes and listening to the harmonics. The game's audio cues are really well designed." The suggestion to ignore calculations made his armor feel tight, but he complied. The simulator's audio filled his consciousness with a subtle symphony of tones representing quantum states. "There you go," Sarah exclaimed as his second attempt produced a weak but stable bridge. "You're getting it. Now try adding a little spin to the field rotation." Despite his skepticism, Zexal found himself drawn into her method. Where concordant training emphasized rigid protocols, Sarah's approach encouraged experimentation. "You know what's really fun?" she continued, expanding the simulation. "Using quantum entanglement to create temporary shortcuts through normal space." Before he could protest, she linked 3 quantum fields in a configuration his augments refused to analyze, creating a stable micro-wormhole. "Your turn," she said brightly. "Don't worry about getting it perfect. Half the fun is watching things go weird when you mess up." Zexal's attempt resulted in a spectacular failure that briefly violated several laws of physics. Sarah clapped delightedly. That was amazing! I've never seen anyone fold space like that before. Did you see how the quantum strings braided together? We should try that on purpose next time. Zexal's augments identified an unfamiliar sensation: enjoyment. Despite his advanced training, he was learning from a child's game. Perhaps, he ventured, you could show me more of these unorthodox techniques. Sarah's face lit up. Of course. Wait until you see what happens when you combine quantum entanglement with gravitational lensing. It's not in the tutorial, but I figured out that if you time it just right. As she explained, Zexal made a mental note to overhaul the Concordance training protocols. They'd spent so long teaching officers to think, they'd forgotten to let them play. Ready for something really challenging? Sarah asked, queuing up a new scenario. This one involves synchronized quantum tunneling through a neutron star's corona. It took me almost 2 full days to figure out. Zexal's antennae drooped. 2 days to master a technique the Concordant hadn't even theorized? That's when I earned my Quantum Master achievement, Sarah said, pulling up her player profile. Only about 30,000 players have managed that one so far. Zexal's antennae went rigid. 30,000 humans had mastered quantum mechanics through a game? Yeah, it's one of the rarer ones, Sarah continued, scrolling through her achievements. The Stellar Physicist badge is more common. About 2 million players have that one. And practically everyone has the basic Helm certification. His augments calculated furiously. Millions of humans were casually mastering concepts the Concordant considered advanced military knowledge. Could you show me more about these certifications? He asked, keeping his voice steady. Sarah brightened. Sure. The game has this whole progression system. You start with basic flight controls, then work through specializations. She pulled up a holographic skill tree that made Zexal's membranes quiver. The basic tier included stellar navigation and power management, skills Concordant cadets studied for years. The intermediate tier covered phenomena classified as advanced tactical knowledge. The advanced tier included theoretical concepts the Concordant was only beginning to explore. Most of my friends prefer the combat track, Sarah said, oblivious to his astonishment. But I love the science and exploration paths. The physics puzzles are so much fun. Zexal's voice was careful. And all human children have access to this training program? Sarah laughed. Well, Stellar Command isn't the only space sim. Some kids prefer Galaxy Quest or Star Navigator. She pulled up a comparison chart. Each game has its own specialty. Star Navigator has super accurate stellar cartography, and Galaxy Quest is great for xenobiology and first contact scenarios. Zexal wondered if his own diplomatic mission had been anticipated by children playing these games. The best part, Sarah added, is how the games talk to each other. She loaded another simulator, and her ship's controls adjusted to her proven competency levels. The neural learning algorithms figure out what you know, so you don't start from scratch. Zexal's augments flagged the implications. Adaptive algorithms analyzing player capabilities. The Concordance rigid training seemed archaic by comparison. How many hours have you spent in these simulators? He asked. Sarah thought for a moment. About 2 hours after school, more on weekends, less during exams. Mom's strict about that. She pulled up her total playtime. 3,000 hours across all games. 3,000 hours of intensive training, disguised as fun, and she considered it typical. Want to see something really interesting? Sarah asked, loading a new program. This is a multiplayer scenario my friend Jamie created. It simulates first contact with a silicon-based life form in a neutron star's corona. You have to communicate using modulated gravitational waves. Zexal's augments nearly crashed. User-created content? Humans were designing their own training scenarios? The community makes tons of custom missions, Sarah explained proudly. Some are really challenging, especially the ones from physics grad students. Zexal's antennae drooped completely. Graduate students were using children's games to test theoretical physics. Of course they were. Back aboard his flagship, Zexal sat in his quarters, surrounded by holographic displays of his observations. His augments were still processing the implications. "Computer, begin strategic analysis," he commanded. "Compare human entertainment software Stellar Command 2185 with Concordant Military Training Program Alpha." The response was immediate and unsettling. Analysis indicates 97% overlap in core concepts. Human software contains additional theoretical applications not present in current concordant protocols. Zexal had expected as much, but the confirmation made his membranes flutter. Expand analysis to include all mentioned human space simulation programs. New displays bloomed, showing Star Navigator's stellar cartography surpassing concordant. Navigation systems and Galaxy Quest's xenobiology proposing life forms their science division hadn't considered. "Calculate total human population engaged with space simulation software," he ordered. The answer: approximately 2.3 billion active users worldwide. A quarter of their population, voluntarily training in advanced space warfare and enjoying it. Display temporal analysis of average human player progression, Zexal commanded. The charts showed humans internalizing concepts in weeks that took concordant officers years. But it wasn't just speed, it was creativity, the willingness to experiment and fail. "Computer, access recording segment 47B, analyze the quantum eye." Entanglement technique demonstrated by subject Sarah Chen. The display showed Sarah's casual manipulation of quantum fields, accompanied by her explanation about feeling the rhythm. The computer's analysis was stark. Technique achieves 23% greater efficiency than current concordant methods. Methodology does not match any known theoretical framework. Humans weren't just learning, they were innovating, creating approaches the concordant hadn't considered. Computer, project strategic implications over the next 20 standard years. The display made his antennae droop. Human space combat innovation would surpass concordant capabilities within 5 years, their theoretical physics in 3. But watching Sarah's patient teaching, Zexal realized he'd been approaching this wrong. Humans hadn't built a better military program. They'd created a way to make learning fun. Computer, begin drafting preliminary report to Concordant High Command. Priority level immediate. Subject, proposed alliance initiative, human educational integration. As the computer recorded, Zexal moved to his observation window, watching Earth rotate below. Somewhere down there, millions of humans were mastering the universe's secrets through play. "Begin report," he said. "Honored members of the High Command, I write not with a warning, but with an opportunity. In evaluating human civilization, I have discovered a method of education so powerful yet so simple, it could revolutionize our approach to training and development." He paused, choosing his words carefully. Everything depended on the concordant, understanding what he'd witnessed. Computer, append personal notation. The humans have not created warriors. They have created explorers, scientists, and innovators who think it's all a game. That makes them the most valuable potential allies we have ever encountered. 6 months later, the Galaxy Games arena was transformed. Concordant initiates, their scales gleaming, clustered alongside human children, their antennae twitching with excitement as they learned to feel quantum harmonics. Sarah, now wearing a cultural exchange badge, coached a frustrated concordant student through a stellar engineering puzzle. "No, you're thinking too much about it," she said. "Just listen to the pulsar's rhythm. The math will follow naturally." From his observation post, Zexal watched with satisfaction. The integration program had exceeded his projections. Concordant students were learning in weeks what once took years, all because they were allowed to play. Admiral, Sarah called, waving him over. You have to see this. Kixtal discovered a new way to stabilize wormholes using synchronized gravity waves. It's totally different from the standard approach. The young concordant initiates scales flushed with pride as they demonstrated the technique, which Zexal's augments confirmed was 42% more efficient than existing methods. Most impressive, he said, his antennae lifting. Have you submitted it to the Stellar Command Community Hub? Already done, Sarah replied excitedly. The physics team at MIT is reviewing it now. They think it might have real-world applications. The line between game and reality was blurring. Humans were incorporating concordant technology into their games, while concordant scientists adopted human creativity. Dr. Chen, Sarah's mother, approached with concordant education officials. The neural learning algorithm data you requested is ready, she said. The results were stunning. Incorporating human gaming principles had increased concordant educational efficiency by 300%. More importantly, their students were developing innovation. A commotion drew their attention. A mixed group of human and concordant children had completed the Kazakh scenario in record time, merging concordant precision with human intuition. Did you see that? Sarah exclaimed. They used the concordant targeting system but applied it through the human interface. So cool! The education officials recorded the technique for analysis. What once took years was now happening. Spontaneously, created by children at play. You know what's next, right? Sarah grinned at Zexal. We need a game where players design real ships. Imagine what we could create together. Zexal's scales shifted to a deep blue of contentment. The humans hadn't just taught them to learn. They'd taught them to grow. Somewhere in the galaxy, a child was probably designing humanity's first faster-than-light drive. They just didn't know it was real yet.